Sarel, thank you so much for being here with me today and for being willing to chat and answer some questions for me.
Okay, you're welcome. No problem at all.
Sarel, do you want to tell me a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, a bit about your teaching experience?
Okay, I'm Sarel. I come from Bloemfontein in South Africa. I used to be a computer technician, a call-out technician. I was actually pretty good at my job, but it was an incredibly thankless job. You know, it was one of those real 9-to-5 rat race kind of soul-draining things. And I just really needed a change. Otherwise, I would do something irresponsible. I don't know what, start drinking or something. But anyway, so in 2015, I maxed out my credit card, I maxed out my overdraft, got every penny that I could get, and I moved to Thailand. And I did a TEFL course there. I started out in a very, very small school, basically in the middle of the jungle. It was a very small town called Samut Songkhram, and the school itself was a temple school outside in the plantations. It was like this tiny little village, about half an hour's motorcycle drive out of the school, out of the town. And so that was my very first teaching experience, that tiny little school with kids who've never seen a foreigner before. I had to teach them from scratch, teach them the alphabet, stuff like that. So I was there for one school year. Then I moved to China. I again ended up in a small school, at least small by Chinese standards. Still had a population of like 700,000 people, but
I can relate.
yeah, so small, a small town, small city, which was okay. There were a couple of things I liked, a couple of things I didn't like, but yeah. So I was there for another year. I actually met my wife there in China. And then in 2017, we both moved to Cambodia, and we've been there ever since. When I started teaching, I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't have what you would call a teaching philosophy or anything like that. But as I've gained experience, I feel like I've decided on who I am as a teacher. I don't want to teach knowledge. I don't want to teach things. I want to teach students how to learn. You know, we quite literally have all of the world's knowledge in the palms of our hands. You know, it's just a Google search away. And I want to teach my students how to gain that knowledge for themselves. Because the world is changing so rapidly. By the time they're finished of high school, everything they've learned throughout their entire school career is pretty much useless. So I want to be one of the first people on that train, teaching students to be self-determined, self-directed, in order so that they can learn by themselves independently when they're out of school.
That is a really brilliant goal.
Yeah.
How are you succeeding with that?
We're doing pretty good, actually. My wife is on board with the thing along with me. She's actually maybe going to do her master's thesis on self-determined learning. I started an action research project in the school with regards to self-directed learning. And so far, it's been pretty good. Yeah, I've seen some pretty good results.
It's so great when you hear of teachers who are passionate and going out and pioneering new adventures. That's brilliant. I'm really happy to hear that. Sarel, how did you find the transition from the Western world into that? How did you find that, and how did you adapt culturally and being so far from home?
Well, it was an adventure, actually. Yeah, my life at that point was pretty much like a movie. For the first 6 months or so, I lived in the town and drove out every morning, the 30-minute drive to the tiny little village temple, jungle temple. But later they gave me accommodation in the temple. Right, they had like a spare little hut thing there where I live, which was cool. I mean, I lived about 2 meters from the river. There were what do you call those things? Those giant water monitor lizards crawling up in front of my house. Monks chanting at 6 a.m. every morning, so I didn't need an alarm. So what I found in Thailand was things were either very good or very bad. There was very rarely like an in-between average kind of thing. It was either amazing or it sucked completely. Yeah. Which kind of balanced it out. I didn't miss home that much. I didn't really find myself homesick. Sometimes I missed the food, you know. Yeah. But I picked up enough survival Thai to order some food, even have some basic conversations. So I think I transitioned pretty smoothly. A lot of my cohort in the TEFL group, the people I studied with, they shipped out back to South Africa within a month. Yeah, but I enjoyed Thailand. I enjoyed the culture and where I lived. Because at that point I didn't know what I was doing regarding teaching, I think that was actually maybe the lowest point. My inability to teach at that point and how I couldn't manage my class properly. So that's probably what sucked the most. But actually living and staying in Thailand, it wasn't that bad for me, actually.
Great. And I think it takes a special kind of person to go into one of those really remote locations. Not many people are prepared to do that. So when you do find somebody who really enjoys the cultural side of it, getting into that's really awesome as well.
Yeah.
Sarel, what was your biggest challenge that you faced as a new teacher? You did mention a couple now, classroom management. What was the biggest challenge that you faced, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, that probably was the biggest challenge. Classroom management, firstly. Kids getting too excited. I'm a very calm person. Now I'm even when I teach, I'm not really the jump around like, hey, you know, one of those kind of teachers. I like things orderly, in control, and teaching a bunch of 7-year-olds using games, and they get a bit too excited and just run around going crazy, screaming like a bunch of wild animals. Yeah, I couldn't really handle that. When I moved to China and I taught middle school and high school kids, and I realized okay, maybe that is the thing. Maybe I'm simply not suited for small kids, for elementary education, because I enjoy teaching those high school kids. And when I came to Cambodia, I started off with elementary again, and yeah, it went as well as you thought it might go. And I'm moving to middle school again in the next academic year. So yeah, I think I like sticking to my strengths, sticking to older people, adults, teenagers, high school students. Yeah, that's what I'm aiming for right now. Another big challenge that I met, especially in Cambodia, was kids with learning disabilities, because they often go, especially in Cambodia, they go undiagnosed because it's like a stain on the family if your kid has ADD or anything like that, you know. And I've had a few of those kids, and not overdiagnosed teacher and parents cannot handle it ADD, like literal, the kid is sitting there blinking his eyes, he's trying to read a piece of paper, but he just can't make it past the third sentence. He cannot. So kids with actual learning disabilities, but we can't get them tested because, you know, parents don't want to get them tested. So they're put in the normal school where they take up 50% of all the energy in the class, and yeah, that's just tough.
And that's not beneficial for the child themselves. Of course, they're not getting the kind of attention they need, but also not helpful for the other kids in the class who are not maybe getting the teacher's attention as well.
Exactly. It's a lose-lose situation. And it's actually one of the reasons I started trying out self-directed learning in my classroom, because some students, they have the ability to go on by themselves. You give them the work, you tell them, here's what you do, you even send them some links to the YouTube video, they can go on. They don't need a teacher. But you have these other students who absolutely need a teacher with them almost 24/7. And going with self-directed learning, specifically a branch called staged self-directed learning, I was able to sort of implement that, where half the class can go on completely independent of the teacher. Some students have some attention from the teacher, just enough to keep them occupied, but they can still work sort of independent. And then I have a lot more time and energy for these students who actually need it.
So it's almost like staging your class, like different levels of kids, of ability, and that's great. I haven't actually heard of that being done before, so it's a new thing for me to hear. I really like the idea of that.
Yeah.
Sarel, what is the most rewarding experience that you have had as a teacher?
I'm sure most people at this point would say something along the lines of, a student hugging me or something like that. But at the risk of sounding a bit selfish, I would say my most rewarding experience is what I've learned. Like I said, I used to be a computer technician. I've grown up with a keyboard in my hands. I've been around computers since before I could say the alphabet. So it was literally the only thing I knew for a very long time. I knew computers, and that was it. But getting into education and getting into these alternate routes of education, it really broadened my horizons. It makes me feel like I'm growing as a person, you know. Now, instead of only knowing one thing, now I know two things. So yeah, I think that's my favorite thing of moving into education, just this new ability that I've gained.
And I think even though we're supposed to be the teachers and we're supposed to be the ones always imparting the knowledge, I think as a teacher you learn just as much as you teach from the environment, from the children that you teach, the other people that you teach with. So it's just that kind of environment where you just never stop learning yourself either.
Exactly, just like that.
So what we spoke about, touched on classroom management. What did you ultimately find was the best classroom management technique for you? What worked for you?
So I tried out a couple of things. When I was new to teaching, as I said, when I was young and dumb, the screaming management technique didn't work at all.
It never does.
Yeah, it did not work at all. What I did found later was that you need to keep your classrooms interesting, firstly, and to, I would actually kind of say, relinquish control. You know, as part of this whole self-directed learning initiative, what I did in my classroom was flexible seating. Right, I got rid of the rows of chairs, rows and columns of chairs. I got a yoga mat, I got a sofa, I got a little coffee table, and I just told my students, you know what, sit where you want. I don't care as long as it's within the room, within these walls. You can sit on the aircon for all I care. Just sit where you want, sit where you're comfortable. Okay? That really helped a lot because the students who are active, they were at the standing table. They were standing at the table because, you know, some students, they cannot sit down. While my other students, they liked lounging in the sofa. And that kind of set most of the students at ease, this whole flexible seating, giving them freedom thing. And yeah, that's what works best for me, giving students more freedom than they've had before, and basically letting them lead the class. All right. I feel my job as a teacher is not to dictate what has to be learned, but to kind of guide them, just throw them some teasers, you know, like, hey, did you guys know about this and this and this? And they said, teacher, really? That's cool. Can you tell us more? All right? And that's how it goes. Keep them interested, hook them with stuff that they like. Don't just read a story or read a book. Do things that they like. Kids these days, they like video games. They like Fortnite, stuff like that. So if you do a project, you know, what I did for some models, science models, instead of having them build the model, I gave them the option. Build your model in Minecraft and share some screenshots, all right? And they enjoyed that. They enjoyed this freedom of tackling the problem in any direction they choose. Yeah.
And I think with doing that, you're giving them the freedom, but you're also giving them the responsibility to handle the freedom. And I think the two of them work hand in hand.
Exactly. So they are learning that there are lots of ways to tackle a problem, and they will transfer this skill to other classes.
I also love your idea about the different seating arrangements. Not only does it appeal for the different learning styles and different personalities, but I think it also makes the classroom more their own than just rows of chairs and desks. Personalize it more for students as well. I think that's a great way as well of earning their respect. You're kind of almost treating them more worthy than what they usually are, isn't it?
Yeah, just like that.
Okay, well, I think from the green computer guy that originally arrived in Thailand, you've come a very long way. Well done.
Yeah, thank you. I also feel.
So tell me about one specific student who you'll never forget, who affected you in a special way.
Okay, right off the bat, I have 3 students actually. The 3 students with the worst learning disabilities that I've had in my classes. And I feel they really taught me patience, right? I have this one student that was in my class just this last academic year, and he really couldn't focus on anything. You know, if you leave him alone for more than 2 minutes, his mind wanders and he's thinking about spaceships and aliens and stuff like that. So as teachers, we feel the burden. My students are doing bad, so I must be a bad teacher. My students are failing, so I must be a bad teacher. But what we need to realize is that your students' performance doesn't necessarily reflect on you. And these kids helped me to realize that. This student, he couldn't do any of the assignments. He couldn't follow the instructions. He couldn't even read the assignment. So I had no choice but to give him a low score. But I know that I've tried. I've been patient with him. I explained his questions on the odd chance that he actually asked questions. Sometimes I remember one time after the whole lockdown thing, I was in a Google Meets call with him at 8 p.m. explaining the work. So I've done what I can, right? But sometimes it just is what it is, you know. Another student also, she was unmotivated. She didn't like going to school. All right. Also, it didn't matter what strategies I used. It didn't matter what I told her, whatever. But unfortunately, due to a combination of the schooling system itself and her problems at home, she just couldn't perform academically. And yeah, I tried my best, but I've learned that sometimes we just need to let it go.
Yeah, as much as we want to be everything for all of our students, sometimes there are just those 1 or 2 that we just can't reach, and it is.
Yeah, you'll go crazy if you measure yourself against the performance of your students. You'll go absolutely crazy. So you cannot.
Great. Sarel, what is your go-to game or activity that never fails you?
Okay. That would depend on the age group and the level, their English level. Some of my favorite ones that I've played, if you have very low level kids, maybe like kindergarten or students who you need to teach things like numbers, counting the alphabet, a game that I call 10 sit. You have your kids in a circle, and then you start counting. For example, start with one student. That student counts 1. Next student 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Whoever gets number 10 needs to sit down. And then it starts again until there's 1 student left, and that student is the winner. Mm-hmm. So complete random thing, but they actually love it. It sounds super simple, but for kids who are learning their numbers, learning their ABCs, anything that goes in a sequence, days of the week, months of the year, they really enjoy it. It's such a thrill for them to see who's going to end up the last man standing, you know? Yeah, something simple like that. For students who are a little bit older and they are learning other vocabulary, you know, animals, color, stuff like that, I like to play In My Shopping Cart. You know, that memory game. In my shopping cart, I have a dog. In my shopping cart, I have a dog and a cat. In my shopping cart, I have a dog, a cat, and a monkey, until someone loses track and cannot remember anymore. That they also enjoy.
Do you go alphabetically with that, or just randomly?
No, just randomly. Whatever thing they can think up, they can pick up. Like I pick a topic, like animals, and then they just need to come up with as many animals as they can. Usually have a ball in the class, and then they just throw the ball at each other. Whoever catches the ball, that student needs to add an item to the cart, and make the chain as long as possible without forgetting the order. As a little icebreaker, I like to do the introduction game. I write down 5 questions on the board, and then a student stands in front of those questions. And then above the student's head, I hold a number. The rest of the students need to ask this student the question corresponding to the number. So if number 1 is how old are you, then they all need to ask how old are you to the student at the front. The student needs to answer. Sometimes it's great to be a bit silly with this one. You know, you can make like bunny ears behind their head, whole class laughing, and this kid doesn't know what's going on. Ask a freaky question like, what is your favorite soup? Something like that. So yeah, that's an icebreaker. And my final game, which works well with more advanced students, is simply make a story, 1 sentence at a time or 1 word at a time. Sometimes I would have different topics, like I would have some cards containing different settings, different protagonists, and something else, like a crisis or something, or a time. And then they would choose randomly, so you would need to make a story about an astronaut under the sea in the future, you know, and then make a story about that, 1 sentence at a time, and see what crazy story we come up with.
And they do come up with some crazy stories.
Yes, they do.
Awesome. And so on the last question, what is one piece of advice that you would give to a new teacher?
One piece of advice I would say is to keep learning. All right, but not only learning new games or new techniques. Keep learning about education itself. Learn about current trends in education, pedagogy, hudagogy, andragogy, you know, stuff like that. Dig deep into education, because a lot of teachers, they feel, well, this is what we did when I was a student, so I'm going to do this now. But we cannot apply the kids from 30 years ago, they're not the same kids today. We have different things. We have tablets, we have the internet. We cannot teach the same way. So you need to keep up with education trends. Keep doing research, keep learning, not only ESL, education in general. Learn about math, learn about general knowledge things, all right? A good way to teach your students English is simply to chat. Get an interesting topic that they like. Did you know that this and this and this? And then the whole class will just converse. They'll just chat. And then every now and then you just just make a little correction every now and then. But yeah, I would say just keep learning is the core of what I'm getting at.
Sorrel, I feel like I've learned a lot from you today, so I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I love the things that you're doing. I love the different techniques that you're using, and really good luck to you for the future.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And good luck to you as well for your future endeavors.
Thank you so much.